Welcome to the Open Mainframe Project stream in Virtual Room 4. My name is Maymolyn Meaner, and I'm the Director of PR and Communications at the Linux Foundation and Chair of this session. This session code is 4E. E is an egg. And the name of this session is The Next Generation of Mainframers, presented by John Murtick, Executive Director of Open Mainframe Project and Program Director at the Linux Foundation. A few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be available after the conference. If you have questions, please submit them in the chat window. And then after the presentation, we ask that you please provide session feedback online from the links on the agenda or by scanning the QR code on the last page of this presentation. With that, John, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, May. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where in the world you're catching this. As I said, my name's John Murtick. I'm one of our program directors here at the Linux Foundation. And the talk I want to talk about today here is the trends in what we're seeing is sort of this next generation of mainframers and how we are seeing this being enabled on flowing and areas where you could even take part or direct people who are interested in the mainframe and being a part of that next generation of what that looks like. So a couple trends I kind of want to call out that I think everyone in this room probably really well knows is that mainframes are a central part of not just our technology landscape, not just business, but I would sort of make the argument that they're a central part of our world and our society. One of the famous things that I have my governing board chair Len Santalucia will always used to say, he would sit me down and he'd say, John, the cloud could go away, we'd all be inconvenienced, but we would still continue on. But if the mainframe went away, society would fall into chaos. No transactions, no transportation, no healthcare, all of these key industries which are backed up by mainframe. They're the backbone of it. That would all go away. And while, if you all know Len, he's an amazing guy. He's also completely not wrong. This is a very big truth. Like this is the backbone of it. The piece that is kind of the challenging part and maybe kind of the weak link of all of this is, what does the workforce that knows mainframe look like? And if we look at it, almost a quarter of those folks are at or close to retirement age. And, those companies that are starting to backfill, which they've been already trying to backfill many of these positions over time, struggle to find that talent out there. And it can be a little bit challenging. I think overall, if I talk to any industry, they'll always say there is a shortage of talent, there's a shortage of talent. So this is not a unique thing to this industry, but this becomes much more pertinent because some of those other industries, it's more of a growth hampering that you're running into place. So meaning your growth is capped because the amount of talent is available. Here we have a sustainability piece that's coming into play, meaning there's already this deployment out here. We need this level of staffing to keep it going. And so I think this kind of creates a different set of challenges that maybe other industries don't necessarily have. So it's interesting because, when we started the Open Mainframe project, there was this huge perception out there that, the outside world, new folks in mainframe, they just don't like the mainframe. Like just period, they have a implicit, bias against it. And it was really interesting because back in 2016, we did our first round of our mentorship program, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. And, students overwhelmingly, we had a good amount of folks that have came in, and that's significantly grown over time. But we also brought them to, share that year was in Atlanta. They had an amazing experience. And we brought them also to speak to our board. And many folks were just sort of thinking, okay, well, we need to unlock, like, what is the interest that these folks have? Like, what do we need to do? And the thing that they didn't expect was all of these students that were touching the mainframe were really enamored by it as a technology. Like they sort of had viewed as like, oh, we're a data technology, people aren't interested in us. But the reality is these students were really interested. The challenge is the gap. Like, how can they translate the skills that they're learning in other areas over into the mainframe space? And we see this all over the place, like hybrid cloud, modernization, all of these sorts of things. And we see more and more companies that are trying to figure out how do we get mainframe from not being this sort of mode. If we look at the mode one, mode two IT, that like how a Gartner would define, like this isn't sort of a split off of mode one of sort of this whole separate group, but how do we encapsulate and bring all this together? This is where this next generation is coming in and is looking to thrive, right? And before where they might have had sort of skills around COBOL or PL1 or things like that, they're coming with skills like Python and Java. They're using different tools. They're not working on green screens. They're using VS Code. They're heavily using Git for version control. They're using a much more modular architecture and REST APIs as they interact with one another. Um, so I think that was a very fascinating thing there. I think the other fascinating thing is the role that mainframe has in these organizations are really kind of aligns well with where these new groups of new mainframers are coming in. They want to move quick. They think about security. They're big on innovation. All of those sorts of things are just as important to these companies as it is to this next generation. So, we talked about we have a lot of folks who are going to be retiring. Um, and we're kind of caught at this sort of apex here, was though we're getting a lot of new interest, we're still not at that point where we're getting a one-to-one replacement. And to be fair, there might be some areas where one-to-one is just not going to happen. Um, but we're still not even close to that. Like we're still seeing that as a big blocking point. So we have seen we've seen over time companies individually doing sort of, different paths of doing it. Broadcom, IBM, Rocket, BMC, a number of vendors have been investing in space. On the customer side, we've seen a lot of big banks, the financial services realm, both UK, US. They've been investing in sort of training programs. What we've seen, and this is a pattern we've seen across a lot of different industries, not necessarily in like training and somewhat in training and enablement, but more as just a general pattern. We could all do our own separate things, or we could find ways to work together. So this has been the real strategy that we have seen come together over the last couple of years is how can, as opposed individually, we work on closing the skills gap? How can we do it collectively? How can we change that? And there's been a number of great things that have came together, and we'll talk about a number of these initiatives in here, from our training courses with labs, from, a bunch of donated and work that's happening, the mentorship program, which has been a huge success over the years, more materials that are being developed by a number of our projects, and then just telling the story and kind of bringing down the barrier of what one might consider somebody in mainframe is, and talk about who those people actually are and who that next generation truly is. And this is sort of the hallmark of what the Open Mainframe Project is really all about. Like we are a group that is set to enable innovation. We do it in a lot of different, realms from ZOS, COBOL, Linux, all sorts of different angles in there. And that's a lot of where the focus of the Open Mainframe Project is. Like we host a number of technical initiatives and working groups where the goal is like, as opposed to us all doing things individually, how can we come together and create this really strong commons that everyone can build from and everyone can leverage and everyone can contribute to and have an ownership stake in. And it aligns really well with the ethos of the mainframe community because the mainframe community is built on sort of that centralized piece as well. Like if you go back, to groups like this or share, their lineage comes from groups of users and vendors coming together to create sort of these shared assets in this shared community. And the Open Mainframe Project is an example of this as well. We focus really on how can we help build these technologies out in the open such that many different people can leverage this. And you can take a look at all of our projects. Many of these you're probably familiar with already. In particular, looking at some of the COBOL space, because this has been a huge challenge point, I think, out there over time. And we all remember back in the COVID-19 pandemic, at least in the US, this was a huge big news. I don't know if it made it into UK or if you had sort of a similar story up there of, the urgent need for COBOL talent. And this was an area where this community came together and built out not only training materials, but also has started to build out tooling to help enable better COBOL development down through the COBOL Check project, which works on bringing test-driven development practices into COBOL, and then an overall working group that is looking at trends and other areas of investments that can potentially come into play here. And in particular, I kind of want to shine in on the programming course because I think this is really a key example here of a group coming together. You know, there are a lot of different COBOL training materials out there. Um, all of it is slightly different. All of it, though, is somewhat overlapping. And what we saw as a community is come together and said, you know what? Let's get a standard set of courses out there. Let's make them freely available. I mean, all of this is under Apache 2 or Creative Commons license. And let's use this as a basis for helping people learn COBOL, not in the way that we might have taught it 20, 30 years ago, but in the way that these developers of today that are coming from a Git-centric, VS Code-centric, understanding how different other programming languages and technologies work, teaching it from that angle. And this has been a rounding success. I mean, there's been thousands and thousands of folks that have went through these training courses and learned a ton from them. And we're also seeing these training courses being leveraged by organizations and vendors out there as they're training their talent as well. So this has made a huge impact. We're seeing universities pick up on this. And the nice thing is again, it's a commons. We see people contributing back to it and making it a stronger central set of training. And this is a common theme we see in a lot of like Linux Foundation projects. Where having this base level of training invested at a commons level rises all the boats, and it gives the opportunity then for other folks to build trainings and other tooling on top of this that might be a little bit more differentiating. So the other angle that we spend a lot of time with is how do we reach and teach these students? One of the things that the Open Mainframe project was really launched around back in 2015 was this concept of doing mentorships. Because again, the challenge is we need to find talent out there. The mainframe tenure, it's getting aged out there. We need to get more folks in. And that first crop, we had about 7 or 8 individuals that participated, and this has continued to grow year after year. We've probably, and these numbers we probably had close to 100 mentees now that have went through the program over, this will be coming up on the 9th year of it this summer here. But the work and the impact that we have seen, it has helped. It's not just a mentorship where you're going and just like doing some, coding tests and things like this. You're working in open source. Like we have had students that have ported Alpine Linux. We have had students that have made Hyperledger, OpenStack, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes work better on Z. We've had them make significant impacts to open mainframe projects like Zoe or Phaelong or Geneva RS or a number of other ones. And I think what's been really valuable here is this has brought a lot of students, and I think last year alone we had nearly 1,500 students apply, of just getting the awareness that there is opportunities in the mainframe space, which I think has been the biggest challenge that a lot of folks have really ran into. Is it's just not been clear. It's not been easy to know, like, where are these opportunities actually at? So that has been a huge part. And then the other part is that these students have just continued on and they've made careers in mainframe. We've seen many of these mentees either get jobs, some of them continue on with the projects they're involved with and be the next mentors to a next crop of mentees. So we're already seeing kind of like a micro community being built around this next generation in this Gen Z sort of world that maybe is forming the next little bubble that's going to pop up here of mainframe talent that can start to offset some of the mainframe talent that's going to be starting to leave the workforce here. The education aspect of it, that has sort of been a nice parallel because a lot of these students coming in, the things that you all might know about the mainframe, they don't know. And so this has been a great group here that has pulled together basic training materials to help people orient to what the architecture is, what it's all about, how it works, all sort of a lot of those base things that don't need to be repeated and repeated and repeated, but are as a good base knowledge that anyone can go through. And we see a lot of our mentees actually start with those materials as a prereq before they even get into their mentorships, just so they can understand how this world works. And you can check out some of the education materials there. They have a great Git book that you can check out. And there's also a student user group that has sort of formed around this, which has been really, really fascinating because this has been an opportunity where new students who are maybe interested in the mainframe area, they have a place where they can engage. So you can check, there's a QR code there. You can learn a little bit more about that. And our mentorship program, like I said, we're right now, if you're a student out there on this call, or if you know a student, this is the perfect time because right now our application period is open for our summer mentorship program. The mentorships run from June 1st to August 31st. You have still about another, about 2 weeks to apply here. And again, there's a lot of our projects that are doing work in here that you can take part in. So, there's definitely in Zoe, but you can see a ton of our other projects have different mentorship opportunities, different work that's being done. And what's unique is you're actually going to be working with the real engineers out there. Like this isn't something where, you're you're not connected to the work, like you're working with the project mentees, your mentors, you're working with maintainers in these groups here, so it's a unique experience that you're able to connect to. And one other, and is the other pillar to this, is that mainframer story. And this was an early thing that we had often heard is the what society perceived as the prototypical mainframer is, um, not to be very blunt, but an aging, white guy, that's in his 50s or 60s, sitting behind some green screen. And the reality is that's not the case. We see people all over their career paths, all over from different genders, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, ages, that are all a part of it here. And this is a story, and this is an area here with these podcasts are a way that we can tell those stories so you can connect. And it's been really eye-opening. I really encourage you to subscribe to these and listen to them because you get to learn a little bit more about who these people really are, and it kind of helps break down that. And I think for people earlier in their career that are thinking about, boy, this might be a way that we could get involved. This is a great way that you can hear their stories, and they all give a lot of great advice of like how did they get involved? How did they get started? What was their decision to really get involved in there? And what's sort of the story that they would tell the next person? So definitely go check this out. There's some great stories. We've been doing these for several years now. So if you've not listened, there's a great back catalog you can go into. But check that out, Open Mainframe Project podcast. It's on your favorite podcast, client as well. And there's a QR code that you can check this out. Oops, a Scalade got slipped there. And finally, we spend a lot of time telling what the true story of that mainframe user is and helping promote different groups that are a part of this as well and are a part of this community. A strong belief we have at the Linux Foundation is when you have a diverse group, when you have a diverse community, you get stronger outcomes. You get more voices to the table, and you get something that aligns much closer to where, the group is looking to go and what the technology impacts are. And that's something that we really we really want to help promote through a lot of the work. We have a strong partnership with Making Our Strong Community Stronger, which is a mainframe-centric initiative around diversity and inclusion and just helping tell those stories in a lot of different ways. And we're also big on really giving a avenue and giving a voice to those who may come from, those different backgrounds of saying what it's like to be a mainframer and how to get involved in the mainframe space and what that means to them. So definitely, check some of these stories out, check some of the YouTube videos we have out. Again, we see a huge connection in this next generation that is coming from a lot of different realms, and we want to help make sure that the mainframe is a space where they can feel comfortable in, because these are the people that are going to be taking the mainframe generation forward. So we have a number of different channels you can kind of check out. I think our real strongest ones that I really encourage you, if just to follow what we're doing, is on LinkedIn and YouTube. LinkedIn, we do a ton of content. We see a lot of collaboration. We do a lot of that on X as well. YouTube is where all of our videos and things like that you can check out. Slack is where really the heart of the community conversation is. And so you can check out and join those channels. You can see what's going on in the projects. And then all of our projects are up on GitHub. And so you can kind of see some of the work that's happening there. So with that, I'm at the back end of my talk here today. I know I probably blew through this a little bit faster than I anticipated here, but that's kind of sometimes how it goes, I suppose. Um, I hope this was very helpful for you. If we have a bunch of time here, so if folks have questions, either pop them in the chat, or keep hearting the May is the LinkedIn queen that Darren has posted there as well, because that's a very spot on thing. We're very fortunate to have some great folks here that are really help push this mainframe content and the story out there amazingly well.
Great. Does anyone have questions? We can try to unmute you if you'd like to say your question or just pop it in the chat. Okay. From Colin Knight, what advice would you give to a person at 21 thinking of going into mainframes?
Ooh, well, I mean, I think
21.
21, you're at a great spot in your career where you can look at a lot of different options out there. When I was at 21, I was, I was just graduating with a computer science degree, and I think the biggest thing I sort of learned out of sort of that degree is being able to understand kind of the fuller aspect of technology, because it is such a changing landscape out there, and sort of having that great base technology out there and being able to understand how these things interact. I think the trend we're seeing is mainframe is not going to be its own separate thing, but it's going to be more integrated into the rest of IT. So understanding how those pieces all fit together, and checking out a lot of the resources, checking out a lot of the projects in here. So, the best advice here, and I think Andy chimed in, is spot on, is jump in, embrace, learn, dig in. It's a great community of folks that are amazingly supportive. Ask questions, try things out. And you're going to find a community around you that is eager to be, along in the journey with you.
Mhm.
And I think we got some chimes in the audience around that as well. Yeah, just jump in.
Yeah. And then Darren mentioned an important part of anyone's mainframe career is building a professional network, and the Open Mainframe Project is a fantastic way to connect with some of the most brilliant and generous people in the industry. It's a priceless opportunity. 100%. Thank you, Darren.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say, I think of all the ecosystems I'm fortunate to work across a lot of ecosystems. And I think this is one that really stands out, as you have a group of people here that truly care about making sure the next generation gets involved and they can hand it over to them, because they've built their lives and careers on this ecosystem and on this industry. So you're getting a lot of people that aren't just, this isn't a job to them, but this is like a part of their identity. And so they look to hand that off to the next group to have that same sort of stewardship.
Great. Any other questions or comments? While you're thinking about it, we'll just plug again the mentorship opportunity for the summer. It's a great opportunity. Applications are due by May 6th, was it, or May 9th?
Yep, May 9th.
And, John mentioned that many of the mentees either stay with the project and become, core team members or TSC members. But we've also had mentees become mentors the next round. And we even have mentee previous mentees now become ambassadors. So we just announced the new batch of ambassadors a few weeks ago, and there are three students who started as mentees for the summer, stayed on with their projects, and are now ambassadors. So it's a really great opportunity to contribute to the open source community and leverage your experience. And like Darren mentioned, this is a great time to network as well. And so you sort of get all of these benefits from being in the mentorship.
Agreed.
Okay. Well,
All
thank
right.
you so much, John. Um, this was a great presentation, and it will be up on the website. And so all of the links and QR codes, if you missed it while John was going through them, they'll be on the GS UK website so that you can find them there. And then we just ask, please don't forget to complete your session feedback for this session. And again, this session is 4E. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you all. Have a great day.